thing I asked you about the difference between just giving your criticism and by just giving your review. Okay, so we learned that when you give your review, it's plainly subjective, wherein in literary criticism, when we give your critique, it start from being subjective, then later on magiging objective. So let's define again what literary criticism is as a preview of what we discussed last meeting. So it's the act of studying, analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, and enjoying a work of art. So these are the four or five things that you have to consider when you are studying literary criticism. Okay, so there are three functions of literary criticism. So these are three important functions of literary criticism. First is judgment, then second, evaluation, then third is interpretation. So all these three are very relevant when it comes to understanding of what literary criticism is. So let's have the first one. Okay, so when we talk of judgment in its strict sense, we say that criticism at first is judgment. Diba, when you are watching or when you're reading a particular literary text, as you go through with reading a book or a novel or a poem or an essay or any form of literary text, or even when you're watching a film, kasi film is also part of criticism. Okay, so you make judgments as you go through with that. So, di ba, habang sa salita kayo, nagbibigay kayo ng inyong mga kanya-kanyang komento. Okay, so that aspect alone is the beginning of digging in to the content of the text that you are reading. Okay, then its primary function, the primary function of a literary critic is to arrive at and pronounce a meaningful judgment of value. When we talk of meaningful judgment of value, it means that we are after with the quality of a particular literary text. Quality of literary text. That's what we meant by meaningful judgment of value. So, hinahanapan natin yung quality niya at yung mga things for improvement so that we can say na this text or literary text is really a good literary work or not. Okay? So, sasabihin nyo, ang literary criticism ba is more of sugar coating? Who would agree that is literary criticism a form of sugar coating? May I ask anyone? Okay? Anyone?
Permission to speak, sir.
Yes, Green.
Well, I do not agree that literary criticism is sugarcoating because it it exposes not just the good side, because diba nga yung just like what we have studied the last time, it doesn't just dwell on the good side or the positive side of a literary work. It also digs into the negativity or the criticism of that literary work. So, yun po.
Yes, very good, Green. Yes, it's not more of a sugar coating yan eh. Although, pero pwede natin sabihin natin siya yung sandwich. Alam yung sandwich? Sandwich. Para siyang sandwich. Di ba sa sandwich, merong tinapay sa ilalim, tapos may palaman sa gitna, at may tinapay sa ibabaw. So, that's what literary criticism, we can liken it to a sandwich na una muna, sasabihin natin yung mga good sides, tapos bibigyan natin ng konting palaman, and then papatungan na naman natin ng things for improvement. Okay? So, the very purpose of criticism is not just to say na pangit yan, hindi nyo dapat anuhin yan. So, it's all throughout the development of literary criticism as a field of study in literature, naging basehan na rin siya para mas mapaganda pa. Kasi dati, dati kasi kapag sinabing literary criticism sasabihin lang nila kung pangit o hindi at kung bakit pangit ang isang literary works, then they will be just justifying it. Parang ang purpose lang nila is just to the Tagalog term for that is likwakin ang isang literary work. So ganyan yung during the ancient time. Pero habang tumatagal, na-develop ang isang literary criticism into a one of the fields of literature as a form of a study. Okay? So, kaya nga we can liken it to a sandwich. Sabihin mo muna yung good side, then papalamanan mo ng mga magandang good side, then tatapala mo na naman yung nasa ibabaw. Those are the things for improvement. Okay? So, the initial thing that you do when you do literary criticism is you make judgment. Pangalawa, sinabi ni Richard, I.A. Richard, isang writer, sabi niya, to set up as a critic is to set up as a judge of values. So ito yung binanggit natin kanina when we say meaningful judgment of value. So this is justified by what I.A. Richard says na to set up as a critic is to set up as a judge of values. So kahit gaano pa sabihin natin na medyo may pangit or may mali doon sa literary work, hinahanapan pa rin natin ng good values or maganda doon sa literary works. Okay? So for improvement. So, according kay Rene Wellet, literary criticism is a judgment of books, reviewing, and finally the definition of taste of the tradition of what is classic. So, we always look at the what is our basis when we look at the quality of the literary work is kung ano yung classic. Minsan ganun yung ginagawa natin. Lagi natin kinukumpara kung ano yung classic na literary forms, and then ito yung tinatawag nating perennial. Di ba we have the so-called perennialism, yung habang kahit matagal na siya, sila pa rin yung standard natin. Yun yung tinatawag nating classic. Okay? So kaya nga nung panahon ng Renaissance period, bumalik sila sa classic. Pag pinag-usapan natin yung classic sa literary tradition, lagi at laging papasok tayo sa standard ng mga ancient writers, mga ancient philosophers, mga taste nila during the time. So we talk of Greeks, we talk of of Romans, okay? We talk of those period when we talk of classic, when we are referring to that time of Renaissance period. So sa Renaissance period, pag sinabi nilang classic, ayan, bumabalik sila sa ancient. Kaya yung Renaissance period, kinikilala rin yung period of imitation. Dahil at some point, na-imitate nila yung quality noong literary works during the ancient period. Kaya ang pinagbasehan nila dyan, yung mga works sila Shakespeare. Kaya merong tragedy during the time of Shakespeare. Kilala si Shakespeare sa tragedy kasi during the ancient period, ang literary classic sa kanila, ang classic sa kanila that time, ang tema lagi is tragedy. So, isa yun sa mga tingnan nila na nagkaroon ng imitation of the classic form of literature. Okay? So, ngayon,
Sir,
yes,
wait lang po.
yes.
May presentation po ba kayo?
May?
Nag-present screen na po ba kayo, sir?
Yes. Wala bang lumalabas?
Wala po dito, sir.
Sa Zoom? Wala sa Zoom?
Wala po sa Zoom, sir.
Okay. Kasi dito sa meron sa... Okay. I-re-ano ko is
Live, sir, meron.
sa live meron. So, kanina pa pala ako... Simula nag-start ako, wala siya.
Kala namin, sir, ano lang ba?
Kala nyo background. Sorry. Okay, share screen ulit ako. Simula pala nag-start ako, wala. Okay. Thank you for informing me. Ayan, meron na? Meron na?
Yes, sir, meron na.
Sige. Thank you. Oops. Okay, ayan. Nakikita nyo na yung screen.
Yes, sir, nakikita na.
Okay, sige, salamat for informing me. Okay, so, ayan, babalikan natin to. Ayan, these are the different function literary criticism kung hindi nyo na-capture itong part na to. Judgment, evaluation, interpretation. I'm still discussing on judgment. Okay, so, magsasawila ko lang bata, maingay. Ay, kasama yun sa showbiz. Live tayo. Anyway, so balikan natin itong sinabi ni Renee Wallach. Okay, yung binanggit ko nga kanina sa inyo of what is classic. So during the Renaissance period, pag pinag-usapan nila yung classic period, and when they talk of classic, they're thinking of the ancient time. Okay? So ngayon, contemporary period na tayo eh. Ano ngayon yung classic sa atin? 21st century. Okay? Kaya ito yung modern period. Eh. 'Di ba? Pagbabalikan natin yung period of history. So meron tayong modern period, postmodern period. Yung postmodern period halos kasakop na yun ng 21st century. Okay? So, dito sa 21st century, pag pinag-usapan natin ng classic, ano kaya yung ating literary standard na tinitingnan? Are we still looking at the style of literature during the ancient time, or ano na ang classic sa atin ngayon? May I ask your opinion? Okay, kasi that's part of judgment eh. Kinumpara mo yung literature ngayong 21st century sa literature nung classic time, yung classic. So sila yung pinagtutugma mo. Ngayon, pag pinag-usapan natin yung 21st century literature, ano ngayon yung ating basihan ngayon ng classic? Anyone?
Sir, permission to speak.
Yes, Paula.
I think, sir, we depend or if a literature is classic, if it has the literary standard,
Yes.
if it has permanent, universality, artistry, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Tara na ipasok yung na-discuss natin sa contemporary literature na Paula. Very good. Okay. So, yes, tama rin yun. That depends on. Pero ngayon kasi wala na tayong nakikita nagsusulat ng style nila kung paano binigkas ni Homer yung kanyang Iliad and Odyssey, di ba? Wala na rin tayong makitang style ng pagsusulat na kung paano sinulat ni Shakespeare yung kanyang makabagbag damdaming mga tula. Gone are those days. Okay? So ngayon, ang tinitingnan na lang natin na mga classic, we are always, based on my observation, tumitingin tayo ngayon sa modern period. The modern period. Pag sinabi nating modern period, ito yung nasa bandang 1940s up to 2000. Yan yung mga tinitingnan natin, yung mga binabalikan natin classic for us if we are after with the 21st century literature. Okay, doon na natin yung pinagbabasehan. So, yan, that's how we make judgment. Again, when you make judgment, according to Renee Wallach, may pinagkukumparahan ka and of what is classic. Okay? And the taste of the tradition. Yung pwede mo rin pagbasihan yung kasalukuyan, kung ano ba yung taste ng madla, kung taste ng mga readers nyo. Kaya nga, there's always a contrast between the quality literature at yung viability. Ayan yung economic side. Bakit mas marami bumibili ng pocketbook kaysa doon sa mga novels na ginawa ng mga mahuhusay natin na writers ngayon? Okay? Yun yung isa rin sa mga issues eh. Okay? Then, after we make judgment, of course, sabi nga natin, in judgment, it's always based on our opinion. May pagka-subjective tayo. Ngayon, we have to evaluate now the content of the literary works. I have here a question. When a critic attempts to judge the value of a work of art or literature, since we're talking of literature, can the said critic be said to have evaluated the work? So kapag ikaw ba'y make na ng judgment, are you already making evaluation? Anyone? Yung mga nasa nasa live, kapag may question kayo, i-post nyo lang dun sa comment. Sasagutin ko na lang na nababasa ko naman. Okay. Anyone who wants to answer? When a critic attempts to judge the value of a work,
Hey, sir.
yes, Ras.
Permission to speak, sir. Okay. So when we say judgment po kasi, I think you are saying that if you will like agree or disagree to the specific point of a novel or a literary work, but evaluation, it requires like careful examination of a literary piece based on its meaning, based on its form, based on its symbolism, and etc.
Okay, so very good, Russell. Thank you. Okay, so yun, careful interpretation, careful analysis, careful evaluation of extracting the meaning. Okay, so no, sabi nga natin, it's no. When you make judgment, you're not yet evaluating, just like what Russell had mentioned. So, why? Because, according kay Limon, evaluation is an evaluative or judicial or normative criticism attempts to judge the merits of the literature in relation to a literary, social, moral, or other value system. Kaya nga, di ba, when I mentioned to you last meeting that when we talk of literary criticism, that malawak ang sakop niya eh. It comes across psychology, it comes across socio-cultural, socio-historical, napakalawak niya. Kasi nga sinasabi na bakit siya ganun kalawak? Kasi nga, when we talk of literature, sabi natin, it is the reflection of life. And the text itself can be a representation of what life is. That is according to Aristotle. Okay? Kaya when we make evaluation of the literary text, we are extracting these things, the social, moral, and other value system. Okay? So, the function of a literary critic is the evaluation of what has been written in terms of aesthetic principles. Let's take note of aesthetic principles appropriate to literature. What's your idea of aesthetic principles? From the term itself, I'm sure you already have the idea of what aesthetic principle is. Anyone? What is aesthetic principles?
Permission to speak,
Yes,
sir.
Ras.
When you say aesthetic principles, this refers to the beauty
Yes.
of one's literature that is based on specific literary standards such as its intellectual value, its permanence, its universality, in its style, artistry, and etc.
Siyempre, Paula, hindi nagpatalo si Russell sa enumeration. Mas marami yung na-enumerate ni Russell, Paula.
Sabihin ko na ba yung pito sa isa?
Para tayo apat lang na nandito sa ano Anyway. Paula, ilan ba tayong nakikita mo dyan sa Zoom? Kasi I cannot see you rito. Kayong apat lang nakikita ko rito sa ano.
6 po, sir.
6,
Pero
okay.
meron pa pong slides pagilid.
Sige. There are
Dahil may
4.
presentation
Po
po.
tayo sa
Ha?
16 po sa Zoom.
Six-
16 po sir sa Zoom.
Okay, that's good. Okay, and we have 4 in Facebook. Okay? That means na meron at least majority are in virtual. Okay. So yes, Russell, correct. When talk of aesthetic principles, we talk of the beauty of literary works. And when we talk of beauty of literary works, balikan natin yung sinabi kanina ni Welleck na we are looking at what the basis of our comparison of what beauty is can be based on, let's say, the existing tradition, or it could be based on the what is classic. Okay, so aesthetic principle has something to do with the beauty of the literary works. It's the delightfulness and the pleasure it gives us as a reader. Okay, and finally, this is now the last function. Ito yung pinakamalalim. If judgment be the real end of criticism, interpretation may be employed as a means to that end. Okay? Kasi nga, nagsimula tayo sa ating initial judgment. Sinabi natin that these literary works reflect the beauty of life. That's your judgment. And now, what will be justifying that premise? And that is your interpretation. Okay? Kaya sinabi natin, interpretation will be employed as a means to that end. Okay? Ngayon, nadyo-justify ngayon yung claim mo. Kaya mo sabi na quality ang isang literary works because of the evaluation and the interpretation that we had. So may kita natin kung gagawa tayo ng isang framework of what literary criticism is. Pwede tayong gumawa ng isang circle. Parang siyang cycle. Circle. So you first, you make judgment, you evaluate, you interpret, at meron tayong feedback, babalik naman yung interpretation mo to the judgment, which means yung last cycle will tell if your judgment is true or not. Okay? So, cyclical yung kanyang approach. So, ganyan umiikot ang literary criticism. You make judgment, you evaluate, you interpret. Okay? So, that makes it now objective in a sense. Kasi if it's only just main judgment, then it's objective. It's subjective, sorry. It's subjective. Okay, so let's take note of what Walter Pater said. Sabi niya, to feel the virtue of the poetry, or of the poet or the painter, the disengagement it, to set it forth, these are the three stages of the critic's duty. So, yung tatlong yon na nabanggit natin, yun yung stages ng trabaho natin bilang isang mga literary critic. Okay. So, before I move on, dito sa sasampulan ko kayo kung paano yung proseso ng tatlong yon. Okay? So, before we move on that, can a literary critic has the right to become an effective writer? Critic ka na nga, pwede ka bang at the same time maging writer? Is it possible? Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Argue on that, Ras.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Kasi as a writer,
Ras,
one of
next.
the characteristics...
Si Ras muna din next si Kring, ano? Si Russell.
Okay po. Okay. Yes, sir. It is possible that a literary critic can be a writer because one of the qualities of being a writer is being objective, supporting your facts, supporting your argument, supporting your main point on what you are saying. Let's, for example, in an essay, okay, how you will going to supply facts, statistics on that, and also in literary criticism, it is objective in the sense that your judgment should have a supporting details or theories. That's why it can be so.
Yes, thank you, Russell. Yes, Kring?
Yes, sir. So, I actually agree on what Russell has mentioned. If you are a critic, then there is also a possibility that you will also be an effective writer. Why? Because of if you are a critic, of course you will have to lay down all yung mga facts mo with objective justification, and then as a writer, what you can do, or parang ang magiging result nun is you can play also with the words. Parang it will go hand in hand kasi hindi mo rin naman hindi mo lalatag yung critic mo if hindi ka marunong mag-outline, hindi mo pa naumpisahan yung, or wala kang opening, wala kang body, wala kang conclusion. And then there should also be an engagement to your reader para at the same time na critic mo yung isang literary work, yung reader mo is na-engage mo siya doon sa literary critic and naiintindihan niya. Hindi niya lang nababasa na okay, yun lang yun pala yung ibig sabihin nun. Pero parang as a writer, maintindihan din niya yung point of view mo. Why did you put that on your literary criticism?
Kaya lang crucial doon, 'di ba? Halimbawa, puna ka lang puna, pero pag binasa niyo gawa mo, hindi naman pala ganun kahusay. That's the crucial thing. Kaya That's why I asked the question. That's the crucial thing about being a critic kasi puna ka lang puna, pero yung tiningnan yung gawa mo, bakit ganon? So, parang practice what you're saying. Okay? So, babasahin ko lang yung comment ni Alvin dito. Sabi ni Alvin, acknowledge natin si Alvin, cautious for me ang evaluation. First glance lang po ang judgment, which is true. Okay? Kasi yung judgment, it's only just first glance eh. As you go through with the analysis of the literary text from evaluation to interpretation, and that will justify your claim. Okay, so we can say the judgment is only just your claim. Evaluation and interpretation will be the justification of the claim. Okay, we can sum up with that statement. Okay, so I will be showing you scenes from It's Okay to Not Be Okay, since recent lang naman siya. And then we will be trying to interpret it. So ginagamit ko ay mga videos kasi they interact with one another and the way they deliver their lines, those other nuances that you observe. So what can you say about the two characters? Anyone? Where I'm also asking the same question yung mga nasa live natin. You can also give your judgment of the two characters. Kindly just put down your comments sa ating comment section. Anyone from the group? So what are your judgment of the two characters? Hello?
Permission to speak,
Yes,
sir.
Russell.
Okay. So, di ko kasi ako nanonood niyan, pero based on what
doon lang sa clips mismo.
dun sa napanood ko, yung lalaki or the man is somehow hindi siya materialistic eh. Hindi siya materialistic because when the woman asks him if he wants money or he wants sex, okay, that is the term. Sabi niya, no. Ang gusto lang niya is yung babae. Ang gusto niya, na-miss na daw niya yung eyes niya. Parang ganon. And yung babae naman, somehow, meron siyang malalim na pagtingin. Parang gusto niyang, yung babae parang parang palihim niyang gustong kuhain or yung babae. Na-shown yun dun sa may huling clip, yung biglang malaki yung isang babae, tapos parang kuha niya na yung lalaki.
Okay.
So yun lang po yung mga dessert.
Okay, thank you. Kring?
Yes, sir. So, based po dun sa mga clips na na panood natin, is yung judgment ko po sa girl, or sa babae, si Komunyong. Ang judgment ko sa kanya is, isa siyang babaeng loud yung personality niya sa labas, pero weak siya sa loob. Kasi dun sa clip na sinabi niya na I dreamt of you doing the hug method. Yung
Butterfly hug.
So, ayun yung the butterfly hug yun. So, ayun yung side ng weakness niya na pinakita dun sa clip. And then naman yung parang sinabi niya, do you want to sleep with me? Sinabi niya yung line na yun na gusto niya ipakita or iparinig sa ibang tao na meron siyang strong personality, which is ayun yung opposite naman talaga ng kung ano siya talaga. And then yung lalaki naman, si Moon Gangte, ang judgment ko doon based dun sa mga clips ko is siya, simple lang, or hindi hindi siya materialistic, and meron doon yung parang ayaw niyang pakialaman, yung parang gusto niya ng personal, may binablock siyang nagkakaroon siya ng parang barrier sa sarili niya na ayaw niyang patuloyin yung ibang tao.
Okay, thank you, Kring. Nag-raise ata ng hand si Lemuel. Yes, Lemuel.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, Lem.
Permission to...
Okay.
Sir, based on the video, I believe that the man is so gentleman and he has a respect to the girl because he did not let the girl stay in his room because kung may makita nga naman na iba, sasabihin ng kriminal yung babae
Mm-mm.
or bayaran, parang gano'n. Tapos dun sa babae naman po, I believe she is so judgmental kasi po, kahit hindi niya pa po narinig yung side ng lalaki, na-judge na ang kailangan lang ng lalaki is pera or sex.
Okay.
So, hindi po siya yung type ng babae na na yung modest girl na
Okay.
ina-expect sa isang babae.
Yes, thank you. Ayan. So, iba-iba yung mga
Amazing.
judgments. Sino yan? Any other?
Ako po.
Yes.
Opo, sir.
Okay. Sino to? Si?
Sir, I think yung character ni Common yung Mendoza, sir.
Yes, Paula.
Yung characteristic po ni Common yung, lalo na po dun sa clip na yun, hindi po siya, kumbaga, liberal siya.
Yeah.
Or ano siya, masyado siyang explicit in words and in her actions. Unlike Moon Kangte na at some point, pinipigilan niya pa rin yung sarili niya on how is he going to express his emotions. Ayun lang po.
Okay. So, thank you. Iba-iba yung ating mga judgment of the two characters. Okay? So, you're beginning to interpret a literary text by just giving your own judgment. So, kaya nga sinabi natin, di ba, a text alone can have a different interpretations. May iba-iba kayong mga point of view na tinitingnan. Some of you would look at the emotion, the psychological side. Some of you would look at the social side, yung how the two characters relate with one another, the social status of the characters. So, ayun, may pagka psychosocial, may pagka plainly psychological, may plainly sociological ang pagtingin doon sa literary works. Okay? So that's what happens during the judgment stage. Okay. Ayan. So I'll be showing you once again some of the clips. So what are you here for? So sabi niya, nabanggit ito kanina, then what do you want? Sex. Sumagot siya, is it worth more than money? And then, if not for money or sex. And then, ito pa, beautiful, I want him. Take note of the dialogues that I screenshot. Okay? Ayan. So, may kita yung different actions of the characters. And this one, sino bang babae may ganyang lakas ng loob? Kayang-kaya mo ba yan, Paula, gawin sa isang lalaki? Kahit ako, hindi ko kaya, Paula.
Mali po yung tinanong niyo.
Mali ang tinanong. Kring, kaya mo ba to? Lalaban. Depende sa kaharap.
Lalaban. Depende po. Charot. Lalo na ko si Kim So yun talaga.
At the corner of my eyes will do. Kayang-kaya, ganyan lang. Pero ang gaganyanin mo. Napaka-hypocrite ko. Anyway. Okay. And then you can really see the different variations ng actions niya. What I'm trying to point out here, kasi madumi lang talaga ako mag-isip. When I watch this, I have a different view on how you look at it because as I interpret the way they act. Although tama lahat kayo ng sinabi nyo, kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo kanina, kanya-kanya tayong pagtingin, kanya-kanya tayong point of view when it comes to making judgment of a particular literary text. But I look at it based on their actions, based on the dialogues, that there is a sexual tension between the two. That's how I look at it. There are sexual tensions between the two. There is a resistance on part of the guy, and there is although there's a slight resistance on part of the girl, but the girl is more vocal one, which is if we're going to look at on the kind of society that we have dito sa atin, kung magpapaka-sociological ang lente ng ating pagtingin, is it common sa mga kababaihan ngayon ang may ganong courage to do that? That's why I ask you. Okay? So, meron bang ganong uri talaga ng mga kababaihan? So, tingnan natin yung lipunan na ginagalawan nila. Kung sa lipunan natin, kasi ang mga Pilipino, ang tawag ko sa mga Pilipino ay so-so ultra-conservative country. So-so lang ang pagka-conservative, which is that we're not. Okay? So if you're going to look at the facial expression and even the way the way uh, the way she holds the pen, her facial expression, okay, tingnan nyo yan, yung mga ganyang mga nuances ng characters. Yan, looking at those nuances, even this dialogue itself can say something about the traits of the character. Okay? So, now you make judgment. Let's now make an evaluation of our judgment. Okay, ang stand ko is more on the psychosexual side. Okay? Yan yung gamitin mo nating judgment. Okay, both characters reflect a suggestive sex. Suggestive. Wala naman nangyari talaga. It's only just suggestive. It can be reflected on the dialogues. I want him. Although we do not say they do not use the term sex. I want him. The way the characters deliver the line and looking at the scenario itself justify, you could tell that there's really a suggestive sex in that. Yung unang pagkikita pa lamang nila, di ba? Yung may hawak na kutsilyo, you can really look at the eyes of the two characters, interpreting it based on the way they act it. Meron agad tension. That tension can be interpreted as a sexual tension. Okay? Maybe it's because of the camera movement. Kasi iba yung, iba yung sa film criticism eh. Sa film criticism, ganun namin yung titingnan. Sa camera movement, kung paano zoom. Okay? But, if we're going to look at it in the literary text, yung setting aside the camera movement, looking at the visuals itself, you can really see that there's really a suggestive sex on the parts of the characters. Ito sabi natin, although the female character is the more aggressive one, it can still be observed that the male character is into sexual desire as well, but restricts himself of committing the act. Kasi nga sabi ninyo kanina, nandun pa rin yung pagiging gentleman niya. Nandun pa rin yung kanyang, hindi siya basta-basta nagpakuha doon sa temptation nung female character doon sa ating pinanood na clip. Okay? Now, since mahilig kasi talaga kay Freud, so we will be using the psychosexual analysis based on Freud. Ngayon, papasok tayo sa interpretation, evaluation. Ito na yung sinasabi natin literary criticism. Although, papahapyawan ko lang kayo kung paano mag-interpret nito kasi medyo yung proseso nito. But this is how it goes. Yung ginagawa natin kanina, yung nagbigay kayo ng judgment nyo, tapos may tinitingnan kayong dapat isang lente lamang o dalawang lente. Ang lente na tinitingnan ko rito, base dun sa nabanggit ko, is on the sexual side of the characters. The psychosexual analysis of it's okay to not be okay. O diba thesis na? Thesis na yan, title na ng thesis. Its implication to teaching. O, pasok na sa BSc English, pwedeng teaching na. Okay, so sabi ni Freud, the gentle stage is when an individual begins to have a strong sexual interest in the opposite sex. Ano na bang edad nitong dalawang ito sa mga characters natin? Okay, sila ay nasa genital stage na, considering their age. Di ba meron tayong, may mga stages kasi si Freud eh. Di ba may latency, yung ganyan niya. Yung ganyan niya sa psychosexual stages niya.
Oral, anal,
Yan, may anal stage, di ba?
halik.
Ayan. Sino yung nagsalita? Silem? Okay. So, using the concept of Freud, so we will be looking at it on the context of the genital stage. And if the stage is successful, this is when folks have heterosexual intercourse and develop loving, lifelong relationships with someone of the opposite sex. Ngayon, hindi kasi natin napanood yung buong series eh. Pag napanood natin yung buong series, there's a scene there that finally they have achieved this. Although implied lang. Ayaw kung bakit kasi may mga bata. Ayan. And as they go through with that, after that, nag-strengthen yung kanilang loving, lifelong relationships with their partners. See? That's how you interpret it. Na it begins from urge. It begins from the desire and the want. And when their urge, when their desire and their wants were achieved, that compensate now the mutuality of the feelings of these two characters. Okay, now let us make interpretation based on the recurrence of events that will justify our claim based on Freud. Of course, it should not end with just merely evaluating it. We should interpret it. And when interpreting it, we have to look at the recurrence of events. Pag sinabi natin recurrence of events, yung paulit-ulit na pinapakita doon sa isang series, sa isang literary text. Alin yung paulit-ulit na pinapakita? Kaya yung paulit-ulit na pinapakita, may meaning yon, may ibig sabihin yon. That's what we meant by recurrence of events. Recurrence. Yung paulit-ulit na pinapakita. Okay? So, there is a recurrence of sharp objects. Kaya ako tinignan ito na into psychosexual. There is a recurrence of sharp objects in the series, specifically a knife and a ball pen. Psychosexual na tinitingnan natin dito at gagamitin natin si Freud. So, may mga sharp objects such as knife, a knife and a ball pen. So, para kay Freud, anong ibig sabihin niya nito? Yan. This is the first scene doon sa series. From here, meron tayong pinakitang knife. Ito yung sinasabi ng sexual tensions by just merely looking at the eyes. Another one, ito, sabi niya, amazing. Paano baburahin yung ibang mga ano rito? Highlighter ko na lang. Oops. Okay. So, sabi niya rito, may tao sa likod. Magka nga dyan. Okay. So, while holding the knife, sinasabi niya, it's amazing. Okay? Pero may interpretation tayo dyan. Okay, ito pa. Ayan. This is my favorite part of the yung matang yan. Another one, eksena, maraming beses na pinakita yung mga sharp objects. Another one, ito. Okay? Ito pa. So habang pinapanood niya to, another sharp objects, ito yung mukha niya. Habang tinititigan niya yan, ito yung mukha ng babae. Parang, I want it. Okay? Yan. So, there are recurrence of sharp objects. Another one, ito pa. And this is, can be interpreted, sabi niya, how handsome. Yung sinabi niya doon na, how handsome the pen is. But, aside from looking at it, just a pen, may ibig sabihin si Freud dyan. And the way she handles the ball pen, just look at the shape, it's perfect, sabi niya. Okay? So, what do the sharp objects imply in the story? Desire. Okay? Pag gagamitin natin yung kay Freud, sexual desire yon. So, ito yung mga justifications natin dyan. Sabi ni Freud, Freud draws upon the laws of association, particularly the law of resemblance, to explain the formation of symbol-referent connections. So, mahilig kasi si Freud na itong object na to, pag may mga recurrence na nangyayari, may implication yun sa life ng tao. Symbol-referent connections. Di ba nga, sa stages of development ni Freud, yung pagsak ng thumb, di ba may ibig sabihin siya nun? Di ba? Kaya nga, nabuo niya yung konsepto ng Oedipus Rex and Electra complex, that at a very young age, may desire na ang isang batang babae sa kanyang tatay at ang isang batang lalaki sa kanyang nanay. Kapag lalaki sa kanyang nanay, it's Oedipus Rex. Pag babae sa kanyang tatay, Electra complex. So, yun yung pinanggagalingan ni Sigmund Freud. Ito yung kanyang mga association. Sabi niya doon sa kanyang libro, all oblong objects suggest the male genitalia. 'Di ba pag binabasa kayong mga tula na ginagamitan yung pen, medyo may pagka-sensual yung atake, yung pagde-describe nila ng pen. So all object that is liquid is also associated to male genitalia. So kung mapapansin nyo, there is recurrence of those objects, of those sharp and long objects in the clips that we had watched. Okay, which suggests the desire of the woman, of the female character, mapasa-akin kang lalaki ka. Okay, that's suggests sexual tension, just like this one. Yan. Okay, so you will also notice, ito pa, you will also notice in the recursive events that whenever the characters have encounters with the objects, like the ball pen and the knife, sexual urge happens, although it is suggestive. Pansinin nyo, kapag may mga eksena ng ball pen, ang kasunod agad, mga sexual urge. Just like this one. Yan yung eksena. After yung eksenang yan, nagkaroon sila ng encounter na dalawa. Although it's suggestive, but you can really see the tension on both the two characters, that there is really a desire on the two of them. Ito yung unang eksena pinakita nun. After ng eksena yan, ito ang sumunod, yung encounters nilang dalawa. So merong pinakitang desire on the two of them. Okay? Ito, ang eksena ito muna, ninawakan siyang matulis na bagay. Ang sumunod na eksena ito, what are you here for? Ito na yung, kaya ka ba nandito is for money or for sex? Diba yung ganyan yung kanyang eksena dyan. Okay, so ito, then what do you want? Ito yun. So, itong unang eksena, sumunod na eksena, ito. Yan yung pangalawang ebidensya natin. Pangatlong ebidensya, ito yung eksena na may implication of desire. Pero bago yan, ito yung eksena. Yan. So, magkakasunod-sunod yan eh. Yan. So, pinakita nyo yung desire niya sa pamamagitan ng ballpen. Habang sinasabi niya yan, may implication agad doon na just look at the shape, it's perfect. Pero, sa loob-loob niya, sa likod ng kanyang isipan, at the back of her mind, nandun yung desire. Okay? So, nire-release niya lang yung kanyang tension gamit yung ball pen. At yung ball pen symbolizes the male genitalia. That I want you. Hey, gusto kita. Ayun. So, yan. So, ito yung mga siniseduce niya na yung lalaki. Ayan. And, itong eksenang ito naman, yung kinuha niya, ito kutsilyo rin yan. Ano yan eh, maliit na, ay ballpen yan, stylus pen yan. Hindi ko lang masyadong i-screenshot. After na eksenang ito ang sumunod na eksena. So, another evidence na whenever na mayroong pinapakitang mga objects that symbolize the desire, the sexual desire, ito lagi ang sumusunod. Okay? Ayan. Okay? And this one, yung eksena rito, bago yan kasi, ito pa yung mga ibang eksena na pinapakita yung desire nung babae. Ito, bagwang paganyan lang yan, nandun na yung kanyang kagustuhan na na pinagpapantasya niya yung lalaki dyan. Ayan. Titig muna kayo. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 packs. Ayan. Enjoy! Si Russell lang naman hindi mag-enjoy tsaka si Ime. Majority mag-enjoy. Okay. Okay. So, that is an example of how we apply the different functions of literary criticism. So, from that example that we had, we begin from making judgment. Ang dami ng judgment. Kaya lang yung binigay examples more on the psychosexual side of the interpretation. Naunawaan po ba? May question doon? Nakukuha niyo na ba? Okay. So, that's only just an offshoot on how to interpret a literary text. But as you go through with our lecture, ang psychosexual kasi is one of the literary approaches of interpreting literature. Isa lang yan sa mga critical approaches on interpreting literary works. Okay? So, these are the qualities of a good critic. So, let's take note of what Eliot said. So, analysis and comparison methodically with sensitiveness, intelligence, curiosity, intensity of passion, and infinite knowledge. So, these are the things that a literary critic must have. Dapat dapat ay mas possess analysis and comparison. Ibig sabihin, you know how to analyze and how you to compare. Methodically, ibig sabihin, marunong kayong gumamit ng mga iba't ibang approaches. Kaya yun yung pag-aaralan natin. Dapat meron kayong sensitiveness. Kasi minsan, we're just making accusation, not judgment, on the characters. So, we should handle it with sensitivity. And of course, lahat naman kayo meron ito, intelligence. Okay? Curiosity, intensity of passion, and infinite knowledge. So, these are the things that a literary critic must have. So, that is according to Eliot, who is an American writer. So, Walter Patty said, criticism is the art of interpreting art, and literature is one of the arts. Okay? Without criticism, we can never ever be able to improve different forms of art. So, according kay Gormon, the task of a critic is to convert personal impressions. Ito yung sinasabi natin, nagiging subjective kayo, di ba? Convert personal impressions into an appearance of an abstract and universal ideas. Okay? That makes you now objective in a sense. And that's the bottom line of doing a literary criticism. So, you do make universal ideas based on the context of literary text. Okay? So, that is according to kay Remy du Gaumont. Okay, so that's it. Babasa lang muna ako rito sa kanila. Acknowledge lang natin itong sinabi ni Jessa before I discuss the activity. Sabi ni Jessa, looking at the holistic factors of criticizing means jotting down crucial factors that would be able to make you even write effectively. Okay, so thank you very much. Meron ba tayong clarification before we close down our discussion? Anyone?